Hey everyone, this is Martin, and we are up to day number 15 on our Build a Roadmap Back to the Land series. And before we get started, today is going to be about the size of the land. Is 1 acre enough? Is going to be specifically the subject. And before we get into that, though, I want to have you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Turn the notifications to all, and that way you won't miss anything, because there will be 30 of these when it's all said and done. And the other thing is that once we got started, we decided to kind of stop, do a companion book to go along with it. That's right here. And it's a Back to the Land companion book that goes along with the video series. You do not need the book to follow the video series. It just has a little bit extra information on it. And if you're interested in that, there's information down below in the description on how you can get it from Amazon. Or if you want to order directly from us, we have some copies that were early unedited versions that have typos in them that you can get for $3 cheaper if that's what you want to do. That information is down there too. Anyway, okay, so let's get started. Is 1 acre enough? And yesterday we did a little bit of a segment on, what can you do where you're at. And I told the story about how we started on a rented lot to start with and was still able to do some things. Then we moved to a place that had, that was about 1/8 of an acre, and did a remarkable amount of stuff on that 1 acre, including buying and setting up a sawmill. Now, I did not cut with the sawmill there other than to test it. So don't think that we were running a sawmill business in the middle of town. We weren't doing that. But we were able to do quite a lot on less than an acre. In fact, we were only on about 1/8 of an acre there. And then we moved to a place that had about 1/2 an acre, and we were able to do even more things there. And but what I want to do is kind of discuss that a little bit, because a lot of times when people are thinking, especially if you're, when you're starting to get this dream of moving back to the land, it's like everybody says, well, I want 100 acres or I want 40 acres or something like that. And that's a pretty big bite anymore. It's always has been, but with land prices the way they are, that's a lot. And so where do you start if you don't feel like you can start on the size that you need? Where can you start? And unfortunately, listen to me on this, because this is unfortunate. I see a lot of people on social media that will say, well, I'll never be able to afford, 40 acres or 20 acres or 100 acres or whatever like that. So I'll never make it. So I'm just going to have to sit here and dream about it. No, you really don't. You can find ways to get things started on much smaller pieces of land than that. And if you're interested in, if you're one of the kind of ones that's interested in like the shed homes or the tiny homes or container homes or things like that, you can actually do a lot on a small piece of land with a small kind of a tiny house to go with it. And you can get started with that and kind of move your way up. If you've got nothing working for you right now, consider starting on a small piece of land and a small type of a home of some kind, and then trade that up. Get you a chip in the game, and then trade it up to something bigger down the road. Now, before we get into the actual lot sizes and how many square feet that is and what you can do with that, if I were in the position where I was starting from scratch and really didn't have anything on the horizon that I would be able to say, okay, this is my back to the land move, here's what I would do. We lived in a town and had a couple of businesses in a town a few years ago the town was established back when lot sizes were very small. And so they are actually, some of them in some cases are even less than 1/8 of an acre. And what I would do, and you can still buy them right now today for $2,500 or $3,000 a lot, or some a little bit bigger lots may go for $5,000 an acre, but they're still available right now today in that community for that price. Now, the city is not real anxious about tiny homes and stuff like that, but I know that they have given variances for being able to construct smaller homes on smaller lots and do things like that. And they've granted variances. When we first went into that town and started rehabbing some cabins, they allowed us to move a camper onto one of the lots and get hooked up that we could live in while we were rehabbing some of the cabins. So even when the zoning does not is not conducive to building something on a smaller lot, they've made exceptions to that, and we'll do variances on that and give you special use permits, like for the campers, to live there for a while you're building something else. So if the case ever came where I was having to start over in that position, here's one of the things. Here's a couple of the things that I would do. I would begin looking for smaller, less expensive lots in smaller towns. Now, the bigger the town you get, usually the more hardcore they are about their zonings and all of that. But if you can find a small town that's got small lots in it, a lot of times they will be much more flexible with you. I would approach the city government to see if they allowed tiny homes or container homes, or whether mobiles were permitted, or whether campers were permitted to be set up at least temporarily while you're building, and see how receptive they would be to that. I would see what the cost of connecting basic utilities would be for there, because really, especially if you're in town, when we came out here to this place, we had to supply everything. We had to supply the water, we had to supply the septic system, whatever electricity that we had to bring all of that in. So that was a huge cost. If you're working off, your first initial step, maybe as a city lot, all of that stuff is very close by and very economical to connect up to. And you can start weaning yourself off of that if that's what you want to do once you're there. But to get started anyway, those things are very inexpensive when they're sitting right at the lot line. So, find out what it costs to get hooked up with basic utilities. Find out how close you can build to the lot line. And if you can, find out if you can get multiple lots side by side, and if you can afford to do something like that, you might be able to get a bigger space and even sell a piece or two off later on to help fund, the transition to a bigger property. You might want to find out things like, is any kind of small livestock like chickens or rabbits or something like that permitted there? And if you can do that, and or you can start raising some kind of meat. Now, that little town that I just told you about that we lived at for a while, when we first moved there, they did not allow poultry, no chickens. But then after we were there, they went through the process of zoning that did allow you to keep, I think it was like up to a dozen chickens, no roosters. I believe they had the rule where there was no roosters just because of the noise. But they did allow that, which allows you to do even more things on a lot that size. Now, I'm going to go through here real quick, and we're going to talk about the square footage of what is an acre of land. And pardon me for looking at the book, but I've got the notes in here. So for reference, if you were to take a tape measure and go out there and measure 208.7 feet by 208.7 feet is almost exactly 1 acre of land. And 200 feet is about 2/3 of the length of a football field. So if you went to about the 65-yard line, or roughly something like that, 65-yard line this way, and then squared that out to 65 yards wide, that's a 1 acre piece of land. And that's actually quite a lot when you start thinking about having a house on there and garden and maybe some work sheds and things like that. So if you take that and divide it down to roughly 104 feet by 52, that's about 1/8 of an acre. So you've divided it into 4, and then you've taken one of those fourths and divided it in half. And that's 1/8 of an acre. And that was the size of lot that we were on when we had that first little 2-bedroom house where we did the garden, the greenhouse, the workshop, put the sawmill up, and then made it portable so that we could move it out to places where we could actually cut with it. And so that's a 1/8 of an acre. And we had about a 700 square foot house. So if you took, he's back. Okay, so if you watched the last 2 videos, I've got these little woolly worm. I think it's the same one that keeps crawling up on me. I don't know where he's coming from. Maybe it's more than one. I don't know. Anyway, so if you're on 1/8 of an acre, we had a 700 square foot house. So if you took 1/8 of an acre and divided that out, we were left with about 4,700 square feet. If you took another couple hundred square feet out for the shop that we had, that took us down to about 4,500 square feet worth of backyard. There was probably about half of that was just unusable because it had trees, and he's determined. Trees and sidewalks and things like that. So when it's all said and done, we probably still had about 2,000 square feet of space on there after we had the garden and the workshop and stuff like that. So is that possible to do that? Is that possible to start? My answer is yes, because I know that it is, because we did that ourselves. So it wasn't like we had to, it wasn't a theory. Okay. We were actually living on 1/8 of an acre and doing all of those things there. When we moved up to 1/2 an acre, we were able to expand out and do a really nice sized garden. We had a big wood workshop there. And so all of that is possible. Now, you can't just go out into the countryside and typically find an acre of land that's for sale. Usually you're going to be looking at, down here in Southwest Missouri, things are kind of based on the smallest when you get out of the woods is like a 3-acre or a 5-acre parcel. And but if you're able to get into a place like a little town that's got the small lots, it's a good place to start if you're willing to do it. Are you willing to start small and work your way up to something bigger? Work your way up to something that is attractive and marketable that you may be able to sell down the road, and transition into a more permanent, larger place with maybe 5 acres or 10 acres or 20 or 40 or 50 or whatever. The size of, if you just take, what I would recommend you do, as a matter of fact, get you a graph paper tablet and just start laying out, 1 acre size pieces, and, as to scale as much as you can, pencil in a house and pencil in a workshop or pencil in a greenhouse or a garden area, things like that, and experiment with different sizes and just see how creative you can get with that. I had seen a book here a while back that was, based on gardening and growing enough food for an entire family on 1/2 of an acre. So all of that is possible. Tomorrow where'd he go? He's probably trying to climb up my leg again somewhere. I don't know where he goes. Anyway, tomorrow we're going to get into a subject that everybody is always interested in. It's going to be day number 16. Learn to create income on your property where you're at. And that's kind of been one of our specialties, because we've created income in so many different ways on recreational properties. So that's the subject tomorrow. Make sure to get subscribed, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you tomorrow. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and a share, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the notification bell. See you next time.